So maybe you're headed to Fort Walton Beach and you're trying to figure out which area of town is best for you. Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's video. Let's get after it. What is going on? It is Andrew Armonger with the Emerald Group at eXp Realty right here in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. Listen, if you're trying to figure out everything there is to know about Fort Walton and the surrounding areas, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and then tap that little bell. It's very important so that it will actually notify you whenever we do a new video. Before we get into which areas of Fort Walton Beach you might want to live in if you're moving down here, keep in mind that we can help you really pinpoint exactly where you want to go anywhere along the Emerald Coast. So just give us a call, text, or email, or however you want to reach out to us. We'd love to chat. So before we jump too far into each of the individual areas, I do want to give a little bit of a backstory for those of you that don't know. I am not actually a local here. I relocated here in 2005, probably 2006 if my memory serves me correctly. So it's been about 15 years, give or take. The military moved me here and stationed me over at Eglin Air Force Base, and then about halfway through my short 8-year career in the Air Force, they moved me over to Hurlburt Field. And because of that, I've lived all over Fort Walton Beach. That's the area I personally chose. So I've actually lived in Shalimar, Fort Walton Beach, Maine, and Mary Esther, which are 3 of the 4 areas we will be discussing today. So originally when I moved here, I actually lived in a condo in Shalimar, right on the bay, absolutely gorgeous. We've either done a video or we're about to drop a video on that complex actually that I used to live in. It's called Finisterre. It was a little 2-bed, 1-bath, $800 a month, nothing crazy, rental, just me and my little pup here that's sitting here taking a little nap next to me. And it was great. You know, the rent was good. I was in a great location, a nice little gated community. It was not gated when I was there before, but it is now. And it was right on the water. So, I mean, talk about a young airman's dream, right? I was able to take my pup, go out and walk the bay while she's doing her business. I'm enjoying the views, and it was outstanding. There's a lot of times I would just take my beach chair, take a Corona or something, go out there and just listen to the waves crashing in from the bay, which was really, really awesome. And then from there, whenever I purchased my first home, I moved to Fort Walton Beach, Maine, because at the time I was actually getting moved over to Hurlburt Field. So if you look at our map, we've got kind of Hurlburt Field, we've got Eglin here, Shalimar, Fort Walton Beach, Maine, then Mary Esther is kind of on each side. So I wanted to be right in the middle, right? So that's why I chose Fort Walton Beach, Maine. And that's what we're calling it for this video. It's not an actual technical name or anything like that. There's actually sub little cities inside of it, or towns or municipalities technically, if we're getting super into the details. But I chose to move to Fort Walton Beach, Maine to be right in the middle of both. And I was about 6 minutes to both bases. So as I was transferring, it was really quick to get up to Eglin, also really quick to get down to Hurlburt Field, which was very important to me. I've since turned that into a rental and moved into Mary Esther. I keep moving a little bit further east, it seems like, each and every single time. I'm actually kind of looking into Navarre now, but that's a different story for a different video. So that's kind of my backstory in the last 15 years. That's kind of how I bounced around. I chose Fort Walton because of its proximity to everything, and it's got everything I needed, right? From shopping to ease of access to the beach to just really everything I needed. And without the commute being too high, I wasn't putting a lot of miles on my car, so that was very important to me. So let's jump back into the 4 main areas. The first of which I will start with is the area I lived in when I first moved here, which is Shalimar. Now, Shalimar is kind of mixed all around. There are a couple of pockets of pretty good little neighborhoods. Poquitu Bayou in general, or in specific, is one of them. We've done a driving tour video on that, so we'll have some shots on the screen popping up right now. But there's also Country Club and then Shalimar Point, where the golf course is. These are all 3 great locations right here in Shalimar, but they're a little bit tucked away. When you drive through Shalimar, you wouldn't actually know that they're there, just like a lot of pretty good neighborhoods. Now, not here to go over individual neighborhoods or anything, but I do want to go over the overall feel of Shalimar as a whole. Now, Shalimar is surrounded by water on multiple sides, depending on which part of Shalimar you're in. It's actually on 3 different sides. It's got a bridge to go over from Fort Walton Beach, Maine, and so there's a lot of water activities, a lot of waterfront houses that are not necessarily going to be Gulf front or Sound front, so the prices are a little bit more reasonable. And that's very important for somebody that's thinking about getting onto the water without spending an enormous amount of money, you know, in the millions that it would be to purchase on the Sound side or even on the Gulf of Mexico directly, which we don't have a whole lot of here in Fort Walton because obviously we have an island blocking a good chunk of it, but it is a lot cheaper to go that that route. Now, it's not the least expensive way to get on the water in our area, but it is pretty good compared to most of the other cities around us. So if you are looking to get on the water, depending on what kind of lifestyle you want, you can actually get on the water, or at least in a complex that is on the water, for about $150,000. Of course, it's going to be a 1-bed, 1-bath in something like Finisterre or one of the other smaller condo complexes. Then, of course, townhomes might be in the 400 to 500s, maybe a little bit higher now as prices continue to rise. And then, of course, single-family homes will range anywhere from 700, maybe 800 on the real low end, all the way up to, you know, insert crazy number here, 3.5, 4.5 million, something like that, depending on the property. One of the best things about Shalimar in general is its close proximity to Eglin Air Force Base, being one of the largest Air Force bases in the country, at least land-wise and not population-wise. A lot of people want to be very close to it. They don't want a heavy commute, so that's going to be a big portion of it. Now, one of the downfalls of Shalimar is that the zoning in there has been kind of messed up since about the 80s. They're kind of cleaning it up now, but in fact, there's a good chunk of it that's getting cleaned up now. There was an entire area inside there that was a large mobile home park. Trailer park is more like what I would call it, because it was not taken care of very well. Of course, it's a cash cow for somebody, but it eventually got bought up, and they've been slowly tearing those down and putting new construction up, which is great because it's really cleaning up that area. Now, the area itself is relatively safe and by most standards, but the look was not always the greatest. Now, Shalimar is going to have just about everything you need for kind of your basic necessities and things like that. There are not a whole lot of shops when it comes to, you know, clothes shopping and, you know, fun shopping, if you will, but it's got plenty of gas stations and places to grab things to eat, restaurants, things like that, and of course, places to live. Grocery stores, on the other hand, there is not one inside of Shalimar that's popping up in my head right now. There is one right over the bridge as soon as you cross into what I would call Fort Walton Beach, Maine. It's just a matter of moments to get to that, so it is fairly quick either way. So depending on what you're looking for, Shalimar could be a very, very good option. Now, Shalimar doesn't have near as many people as the main area of Fort Walton Beach, but that's kind of actually part of its charm. And one of my favorite parts about Shalimar personally are that the neighborhoods are kind of scattered, as I mentioned before. And in fact, Paquito Bayou, I had lived here, like, I'm not kidding you, like 8 or 9 years before I knew that that neighborhood even existed. It's all surrounded by trees. You drive right by it as soon as you leave Eglin Air Force Base. So I drove by this thing every day for 8 years, well, like 5 or 6 years. And I never knew it was there until I became a real estate agent and actually showed property back there. So I didn't have any friends that lived back there or anything like that. So it was this nice little pocket right there in Shalimar that was right next to base, and some beautiful homes in there, mind you. Now, again, this isn't a neighborhood video, so I'm not going to go too far into all of that, but that's my favorite part about Shalimar in general. And of course, getting to be able to be on the water for as inexpensive as you can is definitely a huge plus. That condo complex that I lived in, Finisterre, was great, had a pool, it was right on the bay, there was no dock or anything like that, so yeah, it wasn't cream of the crop, if you will, but it was awesome to be right on the water for $800 a month in rent. Like, that's incredible. Where else can you do that? Now, of course, prices have changed now. You can't get that now, but you can get pretty close, maybe about $950 to $1,000. Actually, you might even be able to get $800 or so, depending on if it's a 1-bedroom. I had a 2-bedroom personally, so maybe the 1-bedrooms are a little bit cheaper now. All right, moving on south, we're going to go into Fort Walton Beach, Maine, which has a lot going on. So we're going to spend a few minutes on this, but just note that for the most part, everything you need is here. There's multiple shopping centers, multiple grocery stores, multiple gas stations, convenience stores, fun shopping. It's got downtown Fort Walton, which if you follow our videos and you are subscribed and you've seen our last couple of videos, we did an entire one on Fort Walton Beach downtown, and there's so much to do there that we only probably captured about 20% of it. So there's a lot going on down there. You've got Uptown Station, you've got a couple of marinas, you've got lots of places to throw a boat or jet skis into the water. Fort Walton Beach, Maine has kind of a lot. And then of course, it's going to have just about anything you want as far as a type of neighborhood, with some exceptions. Now, there aren't any like big master plan communities, and one of the big downfalls of Fort Walton, just to get it out of the way, is it's basically landlocked right now. And this is the case with kind of all of the areas that we're talking about, but more so in Fort Walton. And when I say landlocked, I don't actually mean landlocked. It's probably not the right word, but we're out of space. There's not very many lots to purchase, so it means there's not a whole lot going up unless somebody is demoing a 1950s, 40s home and then putting brand new construction on it, which is Fort Walton Beach's biggest con, if you will, is that sometimes you're gonna find a beautiful, beautiful home and you're gonna be surrounded by old 1950s and 60s style ranch homes, because that's where they were able to pick up land at a price that was convenient enough to make the property attainable for most most people. So if you don't mind being the big house on the block, then it's really not that big of a problem, especially when they tear down an old house, because you're getting a larger plot of land there. A lot of times now, whenever you're getting new construction in a lot of our areas, the lots are as small as they can be so that they can cram as many homes onto the land as possible, because of course builders are businesses, so they want to make as much money as possible, and cramming as many homes in one area as possible is generally the way to do that. So a lot of the builders that are building in Fort Walton that are demoing other things are smaller builders, not going to be the big, real big named ones, although that does sometimes sneak in here and there, but for the most part it'll be smaller builders, and a lot of them are really, really great homes. It's just the neighborhood that you're in is not going to be all new homes, because they're not really going to be able to demo an entire neighborhood, or at least they're not going to be able to pick up the neighborhood to demo it. So Fort Walton Beach has a little bit of everything that you need. It's convenient to both bases, so if you're going to either one of those, it's very quick to get to the beach. In most areas of Fort Walton Beach, Maine, it's only going to take you a few minutes. Now, it's got one pretty big downfall that you've heard on this channel 100 times before, and that's the traffic going into downtown that's crossing over the bridge into Destin. Particularly during these months, June, July, August, it's terrible. In fact, just getting into the southern portion of Fort Walton, just to get like in the middle of Fort Walton, if you will, you're gonna hit traffic on the way. Sometimes you have to take side roads to make it a little bit easier, or just sit there and enjoy your music while you're sitting in traffic. It's not fun for all of us, and those of you in a bigger city are gonna laugh at the fact that we even have a problem with traffic here, because it's really not that bad. In fact, it's generally like a 5 to, an extra 10 minutes here and there. It's nothing like sitting in traffic for 3 hours in LA or Atlanta. I've got a buddy that lives up in Atlanta and the traffic is horrendous area. It's nothing like that at all. But to us, because it feels like a kind of a smaller town, having that traffic when we're trying to maybe get to work, or maybe we're trying to go to Destin or go to the beaches or something like that, and we're stuck in it, it's a little bit painful for the locals, but it is what it is. That's part of having a tourist town right next to us, and we do love our tourists. They bring in a lot of money, they bring in a lot of experiences, which is always pretty cool. So if you want a golf neighborhood, hey, we got it. In fact, the Fort Walton Beach Golf Course has 2 18-hole courses, so living in Kenwood, and there's a couple other minor neighborhoods that are kind of touching on the outskirts, you might be able to live on the golf course right there. And then of course you've got other neighborhoods like Northgate that does really cool community events. They're very community oriented. They're actually the big the big neighborhood in our area that does like Christmas lights. So that's the place that you want to drive through for everything. We did a video on that last year. Super, super cool. I'm actually pretty excited this year. I'm going to get some footage of it so that everybody can see it. It does take a long time to get through, but it is such a good experience. And there are several other neighborhoods just like that. And so they're kind of scattered everywhere. And then of course there are mixed neighborhoods where it's just kind of free for all. There might be a 2-story split level 1960s home right next to new construction, right next to 1970s ranch style home, next to a contemporary hardy board house. You kind of get the point. There's a little bit of mix of everything. So if the actual neighborhood all looking aesthetically pleasing, or aesthetically the same is what I should say, because most of the neighborhoods are pretty pleasing here in Fort Walton anyway, then you've got either option. So you really like the aesthetic look, cool, we'll get you in one of those neighborhoods. If not, and you don't really care, you just want to be in a nice, fun, safe area, there are other options for that as well. And there is stuff to do all over town, whether you're going up Eglin or Beale or down Mariester Cutoff. There's tons of great restaurants. Of course, I live here, so this is where most of my favorite restaurants are, and great shopping all around. So you've got Uptown Station right there. You've got events going on all the time, whether it's tacos and tequila downtown at the Landing. They do movies, they do fireworks. There's just so much going on all around that you can really find just about anything that you want here. The prices are going to be a lot better than most of our other cities. In fact, Fort Walton Beach is probably one of our least expensive coastal towns. Now, you can argue that Navarre is technically a little bit less expensive than Fort Walton, but it really kind of depends on what you're looking for. The prices are fairly comparable dollar for dollar, but you're actually getting more bang for your buck in Navarre, but this isn't a video about that. Fort Walton Beach is also surrounded by water on multiple sides, so you can get just about any type of water you want except Gulf front. So if you want to be in the Sound, which is the area between the Gulf of Mexico and the island, basically the island barrier is stopping that. So it's still ocean water, you're just not getting the big waves. You're getting much smaller, softer waves. Water's a little bit more calm. If you're taking jet skis out, that's a great area to really just get on it and get up at 50, 60 miles an hour and get that speed on some good smooth water there. Then you've got the bay, the heart, you get the little canals. You've got just all types of water. So if you're looking for waterfront, this is a good area to do it. It is expensive, obviously, because location, right? Like anytime you're on the water, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. But you've got got lots of options, and that's kind of the big point. You're also a very short drive over into Destin, Miramar Beach, 30A, things like that. You're fairly close to Pensacola, so you know, about an hour from a lot of different fun things to do. It's very centrally located in our area, and that's probably why it's so popular. Another really cool feature that I like about Fort Walton is that a lot of the restaurants will have docks on them, so that if you're out playing on the water in a jet ski or boat, any watercraft really, you pull right up, dock, tie off your boat, tie off your jet ski, jump inside, grab something to eat, get in the air conditioner, or sit outside and enjoy the music depending on which place you're in. So you've got options like the Gulf, that's an actual restaurant, not the Gulf of Mexico, which is what it's named after, obviously. You got AJ's on the Bayou. I am spacing right now on some of the other ones, but there are several different areas you can just pull right up to and get food, which is really cool. It's a nice little break from being out on the water all day, especially when you're going to be out there for like 10 hours straight. Sometimes it's nice to have that little break. There are also multiple schools for every age category in Fort Walton Beach, Maine, but it's not really anything to talk about too much because it's kind of the same in every area that we're talking about here, except for Okaloosa Island, which we'll get to here in a few minutes. And in Fort Walton Beach, Maine, the traffic flow is generally pretty good all throughout town because a lot of it is 3 lanes on each side, and then even when it's 2 lanes on each side, it just flows really, really well. Now, the only exception to that is whenever you're downtown again. That's where the traffic hits. That's where all of the action is. So that's kind of Fort Walton Beach, Maine as a whole. Now we slide on over into Mary Esther, and Mary Esther is a little bit unique because whenever they put Hurlburt Field down, I believe, and I've never confirmed this, but I believe, just like a lot of times, that they bought a good portion of that area. I don't know if it was through eminent domain or what have you, but there was, you know, just a big portion of it because Mary Esther is actually split on each side of Hurlburt Field. So you've got Mary Esther East and Mary Esther West, and they're both kind of similar, sort of. So Mary Esther East is just like Fort Walton Beach. In fact, it flows so smooth into it, you're not even going to notice a difference. You're also not going to notice a difference generally in prices of the properties or rental values if you're renting, anything like that. It's going to kind of flow right from one to another. The really cool part about being in Mary Esther, for no matter what side you're on, is that you were so close to the front gate or even the back gate of Hurlburt Field, depending on which part of Mary Esther you're in. So super quick commute. If that's what you're looking for, you want to be 2 minutes from the front gate or something like that, you have that option to be purchasing in this area. Now, Mary Esther does have kind of its own downfalls. If you're in Mary Esther East, you're not going to feel them as much. You're going to have everything that you need. You've got shopping, you've got all the stuff that we kind of talked about before in Fort Walton Beach, Maine. You've got all of that in Mary Esther East. Once you go on the west side, that's actually where I live now. It's great because you're right off 98. You can't be too far deep into a neighborhood because there's basically small neighborhoods up top, small neighborhoods at the bottom. Lots of opportunities to be on the water on the south side, which will all be on the sound side. 2 different words, south, sound, right? So the south side of 98, you will be have access to the sound, which is, again, is that water in between the Gulf and the Barrier Island. So great options there, which is pretty cool. But then there's not a whole lot going on the west side. In fact, there's very few places to eat. They just opened up a great Euro shop right down the road, which is super cool. But other than that, there's like an Arby's, McDonald's, and it's just very limited on what you can get. But you're also right off 98, and it's only going to take you about 5 minutes to get either into Navarre for all the shopping and restaurants and things there, or into Fort Walton Beach, pending traffic. Okay, so now we go back into that big T word that we're always talking about. Traffic in the area in Mary Esther can be very rough, particularly in 2 instances. Whenever you are headed west from the west side to the east side in the morning, from about 7:30, probably about 8 in the morning to about 9, the traffic can get rough as people are going into Hurlburt Field. Now that was actually fixed a couple of years ago for the most part. It used to be a lot worse, but for the most part, it's not as bad now, especially if you're leaving around that like 8:30, 8:45 range. That's when I choose to leave my house now because of the traffic. I used to like to get in the office earlier, but I don't like sitting in traffic for no reason. Where it really hurts you though is going the other side. So whenever Hurlburt Field is letting out, there's a period from about 3:30 to 5:30 that it is ridiculous to try to head from Fort Walton Beach back into Mary Esther on the west side of base. All of that traffic is letting out and it backs all the way up to Fort Walton Beach, Maine, around where kind of like the Target and the mall is by Mary Esther cutoff. So right as Fort Walton Beach is switching into Mary Esther, traffic can be a pain. Doesn't help that there are 2 school zones zones you might have to hit depending on which time you're going, and then all of Hurlburt letting out at different times. So me, I don't head that direction if it's from 3:30 to 5:30. Now, I put it in the GPS, it's realistically like 8 minutes more, 10 minutes more. I just have a personal preference that I don't like sitting in traffic. I think you can get that now by how much I've mentioned that on this channel, but it's just a personal preference to me. I don't like it. I don't want to sit there. You know, I just want to get straight to my location and move on to the next thing. The big advantage with being on the west side of Hurlburt, though, are the prices. This is where you start seeing kind of the Navarre prices. And again, this isn't a Navarre video, it's a Fort Walton Beach video, but you're going to start seeing either less prices for the same type of property or a little bit more bang for your buck in the house that you're getting. So, you know, if you want to get a nice little pool home and you're okay with the location where it is, or, you know, any kind of home really, but you want to spend just a little bit less money, but still have the convenience to be able to jump to everything very quickly, well, Mary Esther can be a pretty good bet for you on either side, particularly on the west side. There is one big downfall for you younger folks that like using Grubhub, Uber, Lyft, things like that. We jokingly call it the black hole of the area when it comes to that, because unless somebody is driving by already, you generally can't get those services. So a lot of times we'll be hanging out at my house, maybe doing a pool party, somebody needs to Uber home, and sometimes if it's in the middle of the day, you know, all the way up until about 6, 7, 8 at night, you're generally pretty good. But once you start getting a little bit later than that, when the Uber drivers are a little bit more scarce, it gets a little bit harder to get somebody. So keep that in mind. If that's important to you in any capacity, then that might be something to consider. Again, not impossible to get the stuff. It's just there are certain times where we have noticed it's like, well, where are all the Uber drivers? So just something to put in perspective, we also have lower amounts of delivery in general. So if you want to order some pizza in or something like that, you've got the main options, you know, the Domino's, Pizza Hut, Papa John's. There's a pizza place in Navarre that is amazing, and it's like they deliver to like a mile away, but they won't go into Mary Esther. So it's like, yeah, it just kind of sucks if that's something that's important to you. If you don't really eat out that much or do any of that stuff, then it's really not that big of a deal. You're gonna get a better price for what you're getting for the most part. But the neighborhoods are a little bit mixed, so keep that in mind. It kind of goes back to a little bit of what I was talking about in Shalimar, where you can have you know, some mobile homes or things like that in the middle of a neighborhood. So it could be a nice little 60s home, 2003, you know, nice little siding home, mobile home with rundown stuff in the yard, or, you know, however, it's just kind of mixed is my point. So just know that going into it. There's not any neighborhoods in Mary Esther that are really named. There are a couple technically, but you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know when you walk into or drive into a main neighborhood. You know, there's generally a big sign out front and it's all looking kind of the same. You're not going to get any of that in Mary Esther for the most part. Mary Esther on the west side is also limited on grocery stores and things like that, but I think you kind of got that impression already based on what I've already told you. Of course, the east side, you're going to have all the normal stuff. In fact, you've even got a mall there, and you've got easy access to everything on Mary Esther Cutoff, which is kind of one of the main areas for shopping and restaurants and just overall things to do that are just a little bit more spread out than downtown Fort Walton, where everything's kind of packed in there for, you know, the most amount of fun in one area. All right, the last of the areas is Okaloosa Island. So as soon as you go over the bridge from Fort Walton Beach into Okaloosa Island, you'll have a couple of choices. You can either turn right or you can go straight through. Now, I just did an Okaloosa Island driving tour, so you can get a little bit more info there if you would like. But just note that whenever you go right, you've got about 3 miles, give or take, of island that you can go through. And then there's a bunch of condos on one side that are all Gulf front, and then it's scattered on the other side. Some will be condos, some will be townhomes. But at the end of that, it goes into a gated area where there's a guard there that is going to stop you from going back there, because they do have some stuff that they use out there, satellites and bunkers and things that they use for training and real world purposes, so that they own that portion of it. This is where you're going to get most of your Gulf front. This is where the great beach accesses are that most of the locals use. Make sure you watch that video if you want to find out where all the little local spots are. Then you've got the real popular spots, the spots that fill up with all the parking, and it's just crazy. And you can go to the pier and you can walk the pier for a couple of bucks. You can fish off the pier for like $8, I think it is. You got beach volleyball. You've got just a lot going on. You got Beasley State Park. You've got what we call Redneck Riviera Beach. It's either Redneck Beach, Riviera Beach, however you want to call it. And that's all the way down at the end. If you are a military member or veteran, you also have your own little beach over there that you can go into as well. It's got lots of parking, great big pavilion, just a lot of stuff to do here on Okaloosa Island. Of course, you've got some really good restaurants here. So you've got Foo Bar Pizza, which is really good. You've got AJ's Oyster Shanty. There's a little miniature golf place, which is pretty cool, like ice cream. It's just a very cool little area to get into. And then of course, this is also how you segue into Destin. So for those of you that want to get on the Gulf of Mexico in Fort Walton Beach, this is the only option you've got because it's the only part that's actually Gulf front. And it's all going to be condos. There are technically a couple of townhomes, but I mean, like when I say couple, I mean like total, there might be like 12 Gulf front on the entire area in this section of Okaloosa Island. So other than that, it is condo lifestyle. The really cool thing with Okaloosa Island though is there are rules in place so that they can't build anything above 70 feet. So there's nothing more than 6, 7 floors in each of these complexes because they can't build that high because of the low level aircraft that like to fly through. And I believe it also has something to do with some of the satellites and stuff that they use, but I don't actually know that for sure. But that's kind of the rule there. So you're not going to be in these huge high rises. So if you are one of those people that get a little squeamish being on the 38th floor of a Gulf front property, you don't have to worry about that here. The highest floor you're going to get is 6 or technically 7, kind of depending if they've got an underground parking or not. And then you've got an array of options in both price, types of properties, types of views that you're looking at. So you can get on the Gulf for fairly cheap. And if you just want to be on the island, have the island lifestyle, but don't want to pay all that money, you've got options on the north side, on the sound side. There are condos up there that are fairly inexpensive in the grand scheme of things. You've also got homes you can purchase on there that aren't waterfront that are still there. Just note that during heavy storms and things like that, sometimes the island gets washed out. So carry your flood insurance if you're gonna have a first floor unit or a home that isn't built up on stilts. At least that's my suggestion, but you do what you want. Okaloosa Island is also a great little spot for any of the water sports. So if you want to rent a jet ski pontoon boat, this is a great area to do it. It's actually the place that I like to go is right there on the island. It's just my personal preference. They're all over Fort Walton Beach, Destin. In fact, this entire area is just scattered with water sports. Obviously, that's a really important thing or a really popular thing here in our area, but that's just where I personally like to go. The prices are a little bit better. The service is always really good. And it's centrally located, so jump in a jet ski. I can jump down to Crab Island if I want to fairly quickly. I can, beach the vehicle somewhere if I want to, sit on the beach somewhere. I just got lots and lots of options, so that's why I choose it personally. And it's also very quick to get into Destin if you are driving, or you want to take an Uber up there and, go have dinner and drinks, and things like that. You've got that option. And you've also got options to stay right there on the island within walking distance of your condo, your house, and just enjoy all the amenities that we've already got. If you want to sit on the water and enjoy some pizza, you can do that. You want to sit on the water and enjoy some seafood, you've got that. There's just lots of different options here on Okaloosa Island. That is just about everything I can think of for Okaloosa Island. I really hope this video helps you pinpoint which areas of Fort Walton Beach might be better for you. If you're still having trouble deciding, or maybe you need some extra information, let us know either in the comment section down below if you're a little bit further out, or if you're a little bit closer. Like I said before, please give us a call, text, email early. It is much better to do it early, and especially in this market, you don't want to be driving up here the day before and go, I'm going to give those YouTube guys a call and start it, because we could be starting this process way earlier for you to make sure that you get in the right property. So like I said, hope this was helpful. If it was, hit that like button for me. It really, really helps us out, gets the word out a little bit, so more people like you trying to figure out where to live in certain areas would really help us out, and we look forward to chatting with you. See ya. You want to say hi? You want to say bye, Layla? Bye. See ya. See ya.